Good morning on this Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Joyette Holmes is a former chief magistrate judge of the Cobb County Magistrate Court in Georgia. She was both the first African American and the first woman to serve as chief magistrate judge in Cobb County. We'll be talking with her this morning on Let It Be Known. But first, let's bring on our president and CEO, Dr. Ben Chavis, as we discuss the morning news. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacy, and on behalf of the Black Press of America, we greet you. Thank you so much, and shout out to our chair, Karen Carter Richards, and all of the members of the NMPA. This is Women's History Month, and we're very pleased to have such a special guest. I'm just waiting to hear from Her Honor.
Absolutely. But first, the news, Dr. Chavis. After a rigorous, open, and objective scientific review process, President Joe Biden proclaimed from the White House yesterday that the Food and Drug Administration issued an emergency use authorization for a third safe and effective vaccine to help to defeat the COVID-19 pandemic. The government authorized using the new COVID-19 vaccine from Johnson & Johnson. The president called it exciting news for all Americans, and he says it's an encouraging development in the efforts to bring an end to the crisis. There should be 80 million Johnson & Johnson vaccines by July 1st, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine requires just one dose, Dr. Chavis.
Yes, this is another advancement, and as you know, last year we established the NMPA Coronavirus Task Force. I've been in touch with some of our physicians. This is an advance. So now there are 3 different vaccines. We encourage everybody, if you are in line, if you're eligible, don't put it off. The vaccine can save your life, can save the lives of your family members and your community at large. We have to win this battle against the COVID-19. And I would just say, Stacy, caution everyone not to relax. While the hospitalization is going down, the death rate is going down, we have new variants of the virus. So people should keep wearing those masks, keep washing your hands, social distancing, and yes, take your vaccination when you're eligible.
Yeah, great advice, of course. Washing your hands for at least 20 seconds is what the CDC recommends. Also, like you said, Dr. Chavis, social distance and wearing a mask. That restriction doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, despite the advancements with the vaccine.
Dr. Chavis, I was down in Miami over the weekend, and I was so pleased in the heart of Liberty City where they had the unveiling of the mural. Everybody had that mask on. In fact, they distributed over 1,000 masks. So I think in the African-American community, there's a growing not only awareness, but there's a growing embrace of things that need to be done to mitigate against the virus.
Absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, it seems like we can't go more than a few days without talking about something like this. 2 years ago, Louisiana State Police Master Trooper Corey York shackled and dragged a handcuffed Ronald Green, a black man, on his stomach and violently arrested him following a chase in the city of Monroe. Green later died while in custody. This week, authorities announced that they had suspended Trooper York and acknowledged that Green was mistreated. The admission came after Green's family viewed graphic body camera footage of the arrest that included the trooper using a barrage of expletives as he detained the black motorist. The agency had been tight-lipped about Green's death and initially blamed the man's fatal injuries on a car crash outside of Monroe. Of course, that was later proven to be false, as the trooper had shut off his body camera, but other cameras that came to light captured the trooper pulling Green's shackles and repeatedly violating him. It's horrible. They haven't released the video publicly yet, but the Green family's attorney has seen the video, and it is horrible from what he's described.
Well, that's why we have the Black Press. We have to keep these stories alive. Police brutality is still alive and well, racially motivated police brutality. And that's why the George Floyd Police and Justice Act that is now before the Congress is so important. And we hope that the Congress will pass the stimulus plan. We hope that the Congress will pass the George Floyd Police and Justice Act. We hope the Congress will pass the John Lewis Voter Education Act, Voter Rights Act, reaffirmation of the Voting Rights Act. got some serious pieces of legislation. And of course, you also have H.R. 40, the reparations bill. So some serious public policy legislation before the Congress that will impact the quality of life of African Americans and others who cry out for freedom, justice, and equality.
To respond to David Youngblood, will he be charged? The family certainly hopes that he'll be charged, and they are currently looking into charges. The first act was suspension once the video came to light. And remember, it's been 2 years. The Biden administration's task force for reuniting migrant families separated by the Trump administration will allow separated families the option of being reunified either in the U.S. or their country of origin. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said yesterday. He called the separation of thousands of migrant families under the Trump administration the most powerful and heartbreaking example of the cruelty that preceded this administration. And it was a shame, and it remains a shame how those young kids was separated and have been separated for so long. What a travesty and what a major black eye for the United States, Dr. Chavez.
That's right. I mean, a nation can be judged by how it treats its children, all children, whether they're born in the United States or immigrant children. What you do unto the least of these, you do also unto me. That's scripture. And so the government, I think the Biden-Harris administration now has to correct the bad policies against children that were started under the Trump administration. So we're still in the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. We know that once his cabinet is fully in place, that they're going to tackle this issue.
Yeah, and again, it's good to see that action is finally being taken to reunite these kids. Some of them babies that have been separated. Imagine a baby being separated from her mother. Horrible, horrible policy that was put in place by the Trump administration.
Very good.
Dr. Chavez, Joyette Holmes is a former chief magistrate judge of the Cobb County Magistrate Court in Georgia. She joined the court on March 13, 2015, and she ran unopposed for election to a full term in the general election on November 8, 2016. After being selected and sworn in by Georgia's governor in 2019, Holmes took over as the district attorney for Cobb County. She now is in private practice, and she was both, we should note that she was the first African-American and first woman to serve as chief magistrate judge in Cobb County. Good morning to attorney Joyette Holmes. Good morning.
Good morning to both of you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, thank you, Judge Holmes. We just want to salute your leadership. This is a great way to celebrate Women's History Month to have you on our show.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead, Judge.
Go ahead, Stacey.
Well, we want to.
I'm good. Go ahead.
You know, a lot's going on down in Cobb County and all of Georgia. And you and I spoke briefly about this prior to coming on live, but we see the voter suppression tactics being carried out in the House down there. And as you mentioned, is moving on to the Senate. What are you seeing from up close down in Georgia, the reaction to the 2020 election? And it seems like the Republicans are kind of acting like, well, you know what, we're gonna throw our tantrum now.
Well, you know, Georgia, of course, once you saw the presidential election and the Senate races, is very divided right now. Having served in a partisan office, which is unfortunate, anything dealing with criminal justice should not be a partisan office. But that division is clear, and it's clear in the legislation that's being worked on either side, from Democrats and from Republicans. And what I want people to stop and do is really listen to their constituents. Yes, we are divided, but we tend to be more right or left of center, depending on whether you're a Republican or Democrat, and not operating on the fringes, as unfortunately our leadership is doing right now. We had more people engaged in the process, which is important for democracy for sure. We still have work to do, however, in just educating on those people who are serving our populations. You know, we're all members of our communities, and we want representation that's going to be beneficial for generations to come. I've got two teenage girls, so, you know, I want nothing more than them to be in a place where they can vote freely and also be educated on the issues and the people that they are electing.
Judge Holmes, tell us a little bit about you. You made history becoming the first African American and the first woman to serve as chief magistrate judge in Cobb County. What was that like? And we also know too, and I want to have to mention this, that for a time there you were presiding over the case of Ahmad Aubrey. Let's first tackle the first half. Becoming the first African American and first woman to serve as chief magistrate judge. What was that like?
Oh my gosh, it was a whirlwind, a tremendous blessing. And I have to say, you know, when you don't see anybody serving in the roles that you dream of, it's hard to imagine you being in that place. I have practiced as a public defender in Maryland. When I came back to Georgia, I was a prosecutor in our solicitor's office, which prosecutes misdemeanors. I opened my own law practice and served clients privately and indigent clients who couldn't afford to hire their own attorneys, and as an assistant district attorney. So being able to serve my dream of being a judge and reaching that pinnacle, even where no one that looked like me as a woman or as a Black woman had served, was just an amazing experience. And yes, for me as an accomplishment, but for those people that I continue to mentor, whether they're middle school, high school, college age, or students going to law school, to see that the efforts that they are putting forward will allow them to reach, you know, their dreams and to be able to serve in a role that they often look towards, but feel maybe they can't because of what it looks like at that moment.
Oh, great, fantastic. Dr. Chavis?
Continue to serve as a very positive and uplifting role model, not only for Black women, Black girls, Black people in Georgia, but all across the nation. And I just want to say that as an African American, I'm so appreciative of everything that you've done, as well as all of our brothers and sisters in Georgia. You made history in November, and you made history in January. Now we have two new senators from Georgia who are making a difference in the United States Senate. And that's why every vote counts. And now the reason why I think, Stacey and Judge Holmes, we have so much voter suppression now going on anew in Georgia is because of the high Black voter turnout. They're trying to turn that around. And I hope all the people in Georgia that are listening and across the country don't relax, keep pushing. We need to register more people to vote in Georgia. We need to even have a higher voter turnout in Georgia. Whenever you have oppression and repression, you have to push forward harder.
Yeah. And Judge Holmes, earlier we talked about the situation in Louisiana with Mr. Green and the trooper there. Obviously, you were presiding for a time over the Ahmad Aubrey case. As a judge, when you see these type of cases, being a Black woman, being a Black judge, is there more weight on your shoulders when you preside over cases like this?
I mean, there's always a heavy weight, but the judge is not the person in the courtroom who makes the decision as it relates to facts and charges, what decisions are made to move forward in a trial. The judge makes determinations of law, often decisions that are made before a case is being heard in the courtroom, which is why, you know, when you, after trial, a lot of people say, well, why didn't the jury know this? Or, you know, we heard this in the news, but apparently it wasn't discussed during the trial of a case. Those are the legal decisions that the judge has made prior to trial. But the jury is making the determination of fact based on the presentation of the prosecutor and the defense attorney. So there's a lot of pressure, certainly as the judge in the courtroom, just because the community's perception is that all decisions have been made by that judge solely on information presented by the judge. But the district attorney is probably the most pivotal person in that role, because the district attorney is making the decisions on charging based on the information they've received in the investigation as to whether they can prove. Well, you hope that those charges are brought because they believe that they can prove those beyond a reasonable doubt. You wouldn't want to hold somebody in custody or for trial if you did not believe that you could prove what you brought forward in an indictment. So that's where the pressure tends to be in the role of the district attorney.
I got you. And you have this rare situation where you've been on all three sides, if you will. You've been behind the bench, and you've been prosecutor and defense attorney. Tell us a little bit about each role and how they are different, how you view them differently.
So I view all of them as opportunities to serve. And one of the things that I say all the time, especially when I'm talking to people who are aspiring to go to law school, is that, you know, the mission is not about the position. So you want to serve in the criminal justice system. As a defense attorney, you want to ensure that you are protecting the rights of your client by making sure that the prosecution is not admitting evidence that is not relevant or tends to put somebody in a bad light that does not apply to the case that you are in. You want to make sure that you are not acquiescing in situations where you should be making sure to look at what the future might hold for that person. As a prosecutor, certainly the goal is public safety. And what public safety means to me is probably a little bit longer discussion, so maybe we'll cover that a little bit later. But as a prosecutor, you want to make sure you're being a true minister of justice, somebody who's not only thinking about the prosecution, but the education of the criminal justice system, opportunities to work on prevention, as well as the restoration on the other side. And as the judge, you're creating the accessibility and making sure that the process is fair, that the matters are being handled in the way that the Constitution would provide, the local laws that you operate would provide, and that everybody believes that no matter what situation they are in that room for, in that courtroom for, that there is accessibility to a fair process.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I apologize to our viewers for we have a little feedback, but we'll get through it. I want to mention a couple of things. Chevry Lassiter with the Washington Informant says, the judge looks at the letter of the law. She says, I am proud to see you serve. But a question from David Youngblood, one of our longtime viewers, our loyal viewers. We always appreciate David. And here's a question, Judge. Why do Black people have to prove objectivity while others are cloaked in it? As an example, the Mexican judge in Trump University case.
Yeah, nobody should have to be in that position to prove objectivity. We are, I mean, the Constitution provides that it should be equal justice. I would be the first to admit that it does not always look like that. But one of the things that I've talked about, not just when I served as prosecutor, but when I was in my own law practice and as a criminal defense attorney, I served as the president of our Bar Association's criminal defense section. And it's, you know, ensuring that you don't make assumptions about your client or the person that you're prosecuting or that person that's in front of you. That you look at the story of the case, no matter what side you were on, and make determinations of how to move forward on any of those sides based on that circumstance. That's what tends to make the court system not accessible. If you assume that because I am like female and I am charged with some sort of drug activity, you may make an assumption, well, I probably don't have a job and thus I don't have insurance and I can't afford to go into some treatment program. And so the best option for me is just to take a straight jail sentence and not try to work through a probationary sentence to go into a treatment program. And that assumption gets made sometimes, and it's about socioeconomic status and the assumptions that people have about others when they come into the courtroom and are dealing with situations. So while it's absolutely right that that happens, it shouldn't be. And we have to continue to have those discussions as people who are influencing our criminal justice system, whether it's because we work in it, we are involved in civic and community organizations, being a watcher of the system, or that may be advocating for certain legislation.
Well, thanks for that, Judge Holmes. And what's next for Judge Holmes? I know you are in private practice now, but tell us, what can we expect? You've accomplished so much already, and we are certain that there's so much more to come.
Well, that's a plan. I'm on a journey. As I take on this journey, I have been able to pick up tools that have helped me along the way in every role that I've served in. So as I'm on this journey, I'm currently a private partner and a partner in a private firm, Gregory Doyle, Calhoun and Rogers, in Marietta, Georgia, where we practice corporate law, acquisitions, excuse me, and government real estate and transactions related to probate. And a lot of people have said, well, Joyette, your background has been poked in criminal justice on each side of it. It doesn't seem to be a fit. Well, there was a program that I started while I was in the district attorney's office that caught the managing partner's attention, which was called Project Restore 360. And what we know is that through partnerships on all sides of a community, law firms, chamber organizations, schools, nonprofits, that we can work together as a community to make sure that our community is thriving. And so that Project Restore 360 thinks about the employment, education, housing, and flourishing individuals in our community. And even though the firm that I'm practicing in looks very different from what I've done, they have been very instrumental in allowing me to continue that program from another position. Again, my mission is not tied to one single position. So as I continue to work through that, I want to make sure that the service continues to look the same, no matter where I'm bringing that service from. And I hope to bring that community-minded position to each client that we serve, such that the work that we do for them translates into the community.
Awesome. Dr. Chavis? Dr. Chavis, you're on mute, Dr. Chavis.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Judge Holmes, we listened to you very carefully, and we appreciate and salute your journey, your leadership. You mentioned that you have 2 daughters. I know you're a great mother also. The question I want to ask you is about missing Black girls. We in the NMPA, the Black Press of America, we've been doing a series on missing Black girls across the country. There are over 64,000. Can you believe that? Over 64,000 missing Black girls. And what we have been focusing on, we're going to reignite that series in 2021. But from your experiential perspective there in Georgia, can you just comment on this issue of missing Black girls?
You're absolutely right. That is a problem that's probably not as new as we see because it's being talked about more in the news. But there have been efforts locally through our Grace Commission, which is Georgians for Refuge, Action, Compassion, and Education, to make sure that we are seeing the victims of human trafficking, the victims of people who would be out there to take advantage of our young Black girls. And it's a real thing. Those statistics are real and scary. And as a mother, I just can't even imagine what those parents and the community from which they came are feeling. One thing that was happening a lot, I'd say not 5 years ago, is that when we would find some of these young girls, the young girls may have been in positions where they were forced to bring other people into the trafficking and thus lead to more missing young women. And those young women were being prosecuted as prostitutes or being a part of the human trafficking ring. And what we have seen and what we have learned over the years are that these are victims and we have to treat them differently such that people aren't afraid to come forward. They're not afraid of being prosecuted, once they're able to get away and say, help me, please. I need to get back to my family. Help me, please. This is what's been going on with me. So that's an issue that's at the forefront. It's certainly something that's very important to me, not just as a mother of young girls, but just seeing the effects for years after they're brought out of those situations, for years after they're returned home to their families. So there's work to be done. And I'm grateful that there are organizations, as you've talked about, that are working on that as well.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
That's incredible. And as Dr. Chavis noted, we are continuing our series. In fact, there's an update, Dr. Chavis, on that 64,000 number. Read about it this week at blackpressusa.com. We are continuing that series. And Dr. Holmes, Judge Holmes, I'm giving you a new job, Judge Holmes.
Well, she's a doctor. She's a Jewish doctor. She's a doctor.
Jewish doctor.
There you go. Exactly. We appreciate your insight on that so much. And we will be also looking at the Grace Commission as well. Dr. Chavis, I'm going to give you final thoughts. But my final thought to you, Dr. Holmes, Judge Holmes.
I love it.
But Dr. Chavis, I'm going to throw it to you for your final thoughts.
Your Honor, you honor us with your presence today on Women's History Month. You are making history not only for the women of Georgia, but for the women of America and the women of the world. We salute you, and we thank you for your service, and we thank you for your journey.
Well,
thank you so much, and I appreciate just having a few minutes to talk about it. Thank you. Y'all have a fabulous day.
Thank you. And our Women's History Remembrance, our Women's History Thoughts, because the person that we are honoring today is still with us, a publisher of the NMPA member newspaper, Wilmington Journal, Mary Alice Thatch. She was trained by her father starting at the age of 4 to take over the newspaper. She shared not only a love for journalism with her father, but a strong sense of devotion to the community the Wilmington Journal serves. The Journal is across the street from where Alex Manley edited another Black newspaper, the Daily Record, in the late 1890s. The third generation editor and publisher of the Wilmington Journal, Mary Alice, took the helm of the paper in 1996, following in the footsteps of her father, Thomas C. Gervais Sr., and grandfather, R.S. Gervais, who founded the paper in 1927 at the Cape Fear as the Cape Fear Journal. Her grandmother, Mary Alice McNeil Gervais, first set the type of the journal by hand and was also the proofreader. The Wilmington Journal has served the African-American community of Wilmington and surrounding areas for nearly a century. The Journal is an outgrowth of a printing company that was founded in 1901, or 117 years ago. A little bit more than that now, Dr. Chavis. Each week, the Journal is read by thousands of residents interested in the most in-depth coverage of African-American news and issues. Mary Alice was one of the more brave and vocal voices against white supremacy in Wilmington, and she petitioned the NMPA to launch a national campaign for a pardon of innocence for the famed Wilmington 10, which our president and CEO, Dr. Chavis, led that group. Governor Beverly Perdue finally issued the pardon in 2012. So we say thank you to Mary Alice Thatch, who remains committed to the cause of freedom, justice, and equality. Let it be known, don't settle for average. Bring your best to the moment. Then, whether it fails or succeeds, at least you know you have given it your all. We will see you tomorrow.